I mean, we're talking about an entire industry, the backbone of the most populous province in this country, which could collapse in a week. And are you really telling Canadians that their parliamentarians shouldn't be debating, discussing, representing them in deciding how to best address this? And what message does that send to the U.S.?
We'll make all the decisions necessary.
Canadian representatives are getting absolutely obliterated right now. And CTV's Vashi Capellos actually called out Dominic Leblanc for something that he said, because the Trudeau Liberals have these ideas. But there's one crucial flaw with every single one of them. We're going to get into that. Dominic Leblanc also responded in a way where, yeah, I don't think he was actually supposed to say that out loud, but he did. So we're going to dive into it. Got some more stuff coming up from Chrystia Freeland. Awesome. And Fox News, stuff going on within the provinces as well. Lots to get through today. Lots of opinions. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe to the channel. Like the video. Comment your thoughts down below. And let's kick this off with some immediate yikes coming out of Ontario. Here's what Doug Ford said earlier today.
Tomorrow, the LCBO, which sells nearly $1 billion worth of American beer, wine, spirits, and seltzers every year, will remove all U.S. products from its shelves and wholesale catalog.
That move in particular, removing American spirits and wines from their shelves, is something that a lot of other provinces are doing as well. The province I live in, Manitoba, is doing that. And, you know, with this, I'm like, okay, cool, I get it, kind of. But also, like, what a waste of money for all of the employees there to have to go and, like, put all that stuff in the back. Like, I just... is that really the best you can do, is take their products off the shelves? How is that helping our situation? And then two, it's like, cool. So now some Canadians are not only now going to lose money and really be struggling, but they also now won't even be able to choose to buy their favorite product. Not because it doesn't exist, but because they have just removed it from the shelves.
Starting today and until U.S. tariffs are removed, Ontario was banning American companies from provincial contracts. Every year, the Ontario government and its agencies spend $30 billion in procurement, alongside our $200 billion plan to build Ontario. And I'm urging all 444 municipalities to do the same.
I have so many different thoughts floating around with this statement alone, and it's one that we're hearing across the country right now. And my biggest feeling is just so much frustration, because yes, okay, great. You want to promote Canada, Canada first. I'm Team Canada. Where were you the last few years? Why are you only Team Canada right now, when we are in this mess? Because if you had been Team Canada beforehand, if you had made it easier for Canadian businesses to thrive in this country, rather than having regulations, policies, and all of that stuff that made them much more likely to go and move their business elsewhere, which we have been seeing. Investment has been leaving this country in record numbers. So yeah, okay, great, we're Team Canada. Now, we want to know why we need to be so Team Canada right now, by the way? Because you weren't Team Canada over the last few years. You have pushed, not Doug Ford in particular, but just in general, like you have pushed investment out of this country. You have pushed entrepreneurship out of this country, because it is nearly impossible for businesses to thrive in our economy, in this market. It's nearly impossible. Why do you think American contractors are getting all of those jobs? Why is that? Because they're able to offer more money, partly because of the dollar difference, but also because they can they're thriving in their home country. It's not as big of a risk to take on these projects in another country as it is for a Canadian business, because the landscape for our economy and investment is so bleak. It's so hard. And that lies solely at the foot of all of the people who are standing behind these podiums talking about Team Canada. Like, yeah, I'm with you, Team Canada. That's what conservatives have been saying for years. And one of the biggest slaps in the face of all of this rhetoric about national unity, Team Canada right now, is simply, why was Ontario, we'll use that as an example, accepting bids from American companies over Canadian companies? Why? For the money. It wasn't because they cared about Team Canada. They didn't care about Canadian jobs, Canadian investment. It wasn't for that. It was because the American companies were able to outbid the Canadian companies. That's it. That's why. Being patriotic was something that was very much looked down on as though it's this mass sin of the nation. And now, as of 5 seconds ago, being patriotic is cool and everybody needs to be patriotic. Where were you years ago? Where were you years ago when we could have done things that would have promoted and enhanced our economy so that the threat of 25% tariffs weren't going to hit us this bad? That, yeah, sure, it would still really suck, but thank goodness we have a thriving economy and all sorts of entrepreneurs and investments happening in this country. We have a great job market, we have great employment standards, and it wouldn't have hit us this hard.
They only have President Trump to blame. We've gone one step further. We'll be ripping up our contract with Elon Musk's Starlink. Ontario won't do business with people hell-bent on destroying our economy.
I mean, maybe that was in the province's and Doug Ford's best interest to begin with. There was a lot of people who were upset that Doug Ford announced $100 million to go towards Starlink deals. But yes, Ontario has canceled their deal with Starlink as this big hit. However, here's what Elon Musk had to say in response to this. That is just like, oh gosh, like this isn't working. This doesn't seem like good diplomacy here. Elon Musk literally just retweeted this announcement and said, oh well. It just feels so defeating and embarrassing and hopeless. Like for us that are stuck in this mess, it just feels really hopeless and it's just so unfortunate to be in this situation. And why are we in this situation? 110% because of our federal government. That's the only reason why.
You look at Canada. Trudeau, who is the most unpopular prime minister in Canadian history, instead of working with President Trump, has decided to pick a fight, which he will lose. I mean, Canada is not a big enough country economically to have a head-on fight with the U.S. because the American market ultimately means dramatically more to Canada than the Canadian market means to us.
Yeah.
So I think what you're seeing, and this is going to be a huge, by the way, this is going to be a huge change for the Europeans. They bet on regulation. We bet on innovation. They're going to lose that bet.
And that right there is one of the biggest differences between the Canadian economy and the U.S. economy. The U.S. is absolutely innovation driven. Innovation leads to success. Government regulation stifles growth. It slows down business development. It slows down economic growth. It slows down advancements within technology. Like everything, when there is too much regulation, your economy is not going to thrive. The entire country of Canada is similar in wealth to that of the poorest state. Think about that.
And I also really want to encourage every single individual Canadian. Now is the time to wear your maple leaf with pride. Now is the time for each one of us to think, how can I stand up for my country?
You know, the last time, and I agree with that. Yeah, we should wear our Canadian maple leaf with pride. Absolutely, we should. But the last time that Canadians, patriotic Canadians, did that, they were called despicable names. They had their lives destroyed.
During the January 6th of Canada, the convoy, he wasn't just telling people to stand by, he was bringing them coffee in the streets.
And Chrystia Freeland and her government froze their bank accounts with a smile on her face. Her government very much instigated and antagonized other Canadians to turn against those patriotic Canadians. Nationalism, patriotism, all of those things were viewed as bad. And now all of a sudden, they're A-okay by you. The last time Canadians proudly waved their flags, you sent the horses, you sent the batons, you destroyed their lives. And the fallout of that is still ongoing. The things that people still say that her government was still saying about conservatives up until 2 months ago, it's still there. You are the reason why we are facing a national unity crisis, because that's how you treated the people who love this country the most.
To fight back, to fight for Canada. I know I can do that.
And I would not disagree with the assessment that Albertans love Canada, but their view of what that means might differ from yours. And in particular, I think, and I'm sure the sentiment has been expressed to you as it has to me, there is a feeling among Albertans as to, you know, why should they shoulder the burden of whatever is to come, or the majority of the burden of whatever is to come, when they do not feel like your government has been there for them, closing the door, for example, on pipelines other than TMX, closing the door on exporting more LNG. Like they do not feel, and I mean, you were finance minister for years. You were part of a government that certainly was not talking the way it is now about getting our resources to other markets. Albertans feel like you stood in the way of that happening.
And why is that? Because, yeah, like all of these Canadian politicians are saying, we should absolutely be the richest country in the world. And to hear the likes of Leblanc and Freeland and Carney and Trudeau making those sentiments now, it hurts, honestly. I think that's probably the best way to summarize that, because it's like, oh, so you're telling me that you knew all along. You knew what you were doing all along and how bad it was for our economy. And you knew that we didn't have to be like this, but you chose to be like this anyway. Yikes. Who are you serving? Because it's not your people.
And I do believe that this is a moment when we as a country have to recognize how great it is that we are richly endowed with natural resources. That is such a good thing. We need those resources today more than ever. We do have to redouble our efforts to get those resources to markets, to diverse markets. Albertans know that that is something I stand for, and that will definitely be part of my conversation with Alberta as Prime Minister.
Earlier today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump spoke for the first time, by the way, since Donald Trump's inauguration, about the tariff situation. One thing that's kind of interesting here is the fact that he spoke with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau first, didn't really say anything about it, had a call with Mexico afterwards, where he then said that he had a very friendly conversation where she agreed to immediately supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the border separating Mexico and the United States, and that those soldiers will be specifically designated to stop the flow of fentanyl and illegal migrants into the USA. They also agreed to immediately pause the anticipated tariffs for a 1-month period, during which time they will start having negotiations about the situation. He said no such things about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and what their meeting entailed. And they do actually have a call that is slated for just a little bit later today. I have a feeling this video is going to go up after that call and it won't include the updates. So apologies there, but I'm sure if it's noteworthy, we'll talk about it tomorrow. But here is just a little bit. Donald Trump, he has been live in the Oval Office, which is like almost unprecedented, by the way, for a country or a country leader to do, is to have them being live streamed for so many hours every single day, taking questions from the press the way that he is. I've never seen anything like that before. And somebody did question him a little bit about Canada and Mexico. Hey, could Canada maybe see some sort of a response similar to that of Mexico, which was just announced earlier today? And here's what he had to say about that.
Is there any chance that Canada or China could also get out of the tariffs after you struck a deal with Mexico?
Well, nobody's out with Mexico. We had a great talk with Mexico. And we had President Sheinbaum is a woman. I like her very much. We've had good relationships, but we have to stop fentanyl from coming in, whether I like somebody or not, and we have to stop the illegal aliens from coming in. I think we've lost 200,000 people on average a year for many years, much higher than the 100,000, could be even closer to 300,000. And they've agreed to put in 10,000 soldiers permanently, like forever, 10,000 soldiers at their side of the border and stop fentanyl and illegal aliens from coming into our country. They have a big incentive to do. Other than that, we've agreed to talk and consider various other things. We haven't agreed on tariffs yet, and maybe we will, maybe we won't. But we have a very good relationship. I also spoke with Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada, and we had a good talk in the morning, but I did ask him a couple of questions, like, you know, banks aren't allowed to do business in Canada. Canada is very tough. Canada is very, you know, we're not treated well by Canada, and we have to be treated well. Banks are not, as an example, allowed. Did you know that? That banks, American banks, are not allowed to do business in Canada. Can you believe that?
You know what's kind of funny about that is the fact that, yeah, American banks are pretty much obsolete in this country due to our regulations and policies, but we do allow Chinese banks to operate here. So that's kind of funny. Trump went on in this as well to complain about the lack of American products in terms of farming, agriculture-related stuff that are able to come into Canada. And one major reason for that is because of our regulations in terms of chemicals that can be used on products that the U.S. has just a lot more of a loose policy about. So there's a lot of something could maybe be done there, like if the U.S. was going to tighten up some of their policies in terms of like sugar content, the chemicals that they use in their farming, then I'm sure that conversation could be had. And I mean, they are a part of Make America Healthy Again. So maybe that's something that will come to fruition here.
It puts them in a position of power to say, look, a deal can be made if you give me what I want. The challenge for Canada is what is it that Donald Trump wants? Because on the Mexican border, it was very clear. It was guns and it was people and it was illegal crossings at the border. That was the issue. Canada plays a much, much smaller percentage, 1% of those illegal crossings, less than 1% of fentanyl crossings.
We've talked about this in past videos just in the last couple days if you want to go back and watch those. But these numbers of 1%, less than 1%, are just, I don't believe them at all. There's no way to believe them because if you just do the math yourself, from a single fentanyl bust that came out of Canada into the United States, it accounted for 30%. So I don't know where they're getting that 1% number. Also, how these are both things that are criminal in nature. How can you definitively say it's 1% and less than 1% when people are breaking the law in order to do it? Those percentages can only come from the people who were caught, not the full amount, the grand scale of what's actually going in.
So none of the big solutions to the challenges that the U.S. has with Canada are quick, are easy, are not necessarily as simple, but as easily done as sending 10,000 National Guard members to the border. And that's the challenge.
And here is the biggest, most fundamental challenge with anything at all that the Trudeau government could try to do to try to get a deal similar to Mexico, to try to push off tariffs. Let's negotiate. Parliament is prorogued. Why would Justin Trudeau prorogue Parliament right now? Several things that Justin Trudeau has said, oh, this is what we're going to be doing, all result in needing to have Parliament in session so that they can vote on spending or vote on big changes that are going to be coming, new bills, new legislation. All of that needs Parliament. And Dominic Leblanc here was questioned about this by Veshy Capellos. And I don't think he was supposed to say what he did because he pretty much admitted, yeah, we're not going to do that, though. We're not going to recall Parliament because, well, we know that they're just going to vote us out immediately, and we don't want to be voted out immediately. Just listen to this.
How far are you prepared to go to support those workers? And doesn't Parliament need to be in session to make that happen?
So again, two questions. The last question, no, we believe that the government has the instruments necessary to support workers and Canadian businesses in the current context. What we did last night, what we can do with programs like employment insurance, what we can do with what I can do in terms of providing liquidity, financial assistance to businesses through the Crown Corporations, Export Development Canada, Business Development Canada. There's a lot of instruments. I know that the Deputy Minister of Finance, the Governor of the Bank of Canada are meeting the leaders of Canada's 6 biggest banks today to decide and to discuss with them what instruments are necessary to support sectors of the economy, to the example of the auto sector that will be hard hit. So we'll be there to support these businesses. We think we have all the instruments and the programs available to do so. The provinces will also step up. The provinces, I was with the Prime Minister in his conversation with all the premiers yesterday. Every one of them talked about the importance of working together to support businesses and workers.
So, Minister, with all respect, you do need to come to Parliament to have, you know, extraordinary measures like during the pandemic, like CERB, like whatever it happens to be. I mean, we're talking about an entire industry, the backbone of the most populous province in this country, which could collapse in a week. And are you really telling Canadians that their parliamentarians shouldn't be debating, discussing, representing them in deciding how to best address this? And what message does that send to the U.S.?
We'll make all the decisions necessary to support workers and businesses. So If that circumstance that you described turns out to be the case, obviously we would do what is necessary.
So you're not going to avoid it just to stave off an election, to be clear?
Well, but again, therein lies the contradiction. The opposition parties have vowed at the first opportunity to cause an election. That's a guaranteed way to make sure that Parliament doesn't meet for 2 or 3 more months. So they can't have it both ways. You can't say, hurry up, bring Parliament back because we want to have an election, which would mean that Parliament would not be
But I mean, the timing is essentially set off by the Prime Minister deciding at the point he did to vacate his position. I mean, it's not the opposition's fault that he waited until he did.
The issue is, does the government have the necessary instruments and programs to support sectors of the economy and workers? The answer is yes. The politics of people parading around the foyer of the House of Commons with manufactured outrage, you've been around long enough, Vashti, that's a whole separate conversation.
Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Over Opinionated. I'm Jasmine Lane. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel. It would mean so much to me. You can also like the video, comment your thoughts down below, and give me a follow on other social media platforms as well. I'll talk to you very, very soon.